Hi, my friends.
Hey there.
Hey João, hey Norah,
How are you guys?
fine.
How are you doing?
Good. I'm in summer mode.
Yes,
We're
um, we've
opposite.
heard we've heard that there in the United States it's quite hot where Nora lives, and where I live here in Brazil it's quite cold. I live in this south part of the country. It's quite cold. I don't know what about the part where Daniel lives. If it's hot or cold, it never gets cold there. I think.
Never. It's hot all the year.
Oh my
This is really
God.
interesting. So we're in really different climates in terms of weather, but we're in the same climate when it comes to this amazing book. We're finishing tonight the first part of the book. We've reached, and we're going to talk about that tonight, a really emotional part, a very important part in Saul of Tarsus' life, this great apostle. And from today, on we're gonna see much difference in this amazing character. Before we start properly talking about the book, without any further ado, our great friend Nora will bring us some prayer, and then we can start more relaxed and much calmer.
All right, friends, here we go. Let us jump into that vibration and just ask Mother, Father, God for strength, for peace and love in our souls, that our cells are relaxed and calm, that the message this evening transforms, that we leave here with something absolutely extraordinary and that we can pass it on. We ask for all of those in their homes that are listening for blessings, for brothers João Pedro, for Daniel, myself, and anyone who is needing a boost, that the mentors guide us all. And if we have waters by our sides, that they're also blessed. Beautiful magnetic energies. That said, I say um, a Hail Mary prayer, and then we kindly ask to begin this study. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. And so be it.
Beautiful, dear.
Thank you.
Beautiful. So before we start talking about today pages, let's recap a little about what Nora brought us last week. So we saw Saul of Tarsus in a sunny morning. He was in the Sanhedrin and he was eagerly questioning one of his helpers. Isaac, have you complied with my orders about the information I requested? And the man responded, yes, sir. Among the prisoners, I found a young man who knows the old Ananias. Saul said, very good, obviously satisfied. And where does this Ananias live? That he did not want to say, despite my insistence. He claimed he didn't know. And then Saul again. Well, he may be lying. Saul got really mad. These men are capable of anything. Make immediate arrangements for him to be brought here as soon as possible. I'll get the truth out of him. Do you know the old Ananias, an itinerant preacher of the way? Yes, sir. How long? I met him on the day before my imprisonment about a month ago. Those were the first words in their dialogue. And then he went further. And where does he live, this follower of the carpenter? This I do not know, the young man said timidly. When I met him, he was living in a poor district in Jerusalem where he was teaching the gospel. Saul did not pay any attention to the man's attitude of profound humility, and frowning, he said in a threatening voice, do you think you can lie to a doctor of the law? And the man said, sir, I swear. But it wasn't enough. Saul did not condescend to notice his supplicating gesture, and turning to one of the guards, he said, Julian, we cannot waste any more time. I need this information. I think the fingernail torture will convince him not to continue hiding the truth. Saul ordered um, I stopped to the punishment. The man was severe punished, and while he ordered that stop for a few moments, he wanted again to hear what the man had to say. And the man, in tears, said, "Sir, Ananias isn't here in Jerusalem anymore. At our last meeting, 3 days before we were imprisoned, the old disciple of the gospel said goodbye and told us he was going to live in Damascus." And this is very sad. The man got really sad because at this point, after he got tortured, he told the truth. And Saul went on, "Is that all you know?" The man said, "I swear it." In 2 days' time, Saul of Tarsus called what he regarded as a singularly important meeting of the Sanhedrin. All his colleagues answered the call without exception. The doctor of the law opened the session and explained the reason for the meeting. So, this is the context that the Bible doesn't bring for us in much details. Saul, opening that meeting, said, "Friends, for quite some time, we have been meeting to examine the character of the religious struggle that has been created in Jerusalem due to the activities of the cohorts of the carpenter of Nazareth. We have learned from my inquiries to the religious authorities in Joppa and Caesarea that the disturbances that the followers of Christ have been maliciously provoking have caused serious harm to public order. We need to expand our cleansing work not only to these centers, but just now alarming news has come from Damascus, requiring immediate attention. Dangerous elements are at work there, and an old man named Ananias is disturbing the lives of those who need peace in the synagogues. It would not be right for the highest tribunal of the Jewish people to remain disinterested in Jewish communities in other areas. Therefore, Saul of Tarsus proposed that they extend the benefits of that campaign to other cities. To do so, he offered all his personal services at no cost to the house he served. The required document of jurisdiction would be all he needed in order to apply all the resources he saw fitting, including the death penalty itself when deemed necessary and appropriate. Saul's proposal was received with shows of approval. This is really nice because we see that he was really going further with the plan. So, bearing all those letters of jurisdiction to act as fitting in cooperation with the synagogues of Damascus, he agreed to be accompanied by three respectable men who offered to go with him as servants' friends. On the day before his arrival, and nearly at the end of the difficult and arduous journey, he was already heading to Damascus. Saul of Tarsus felt that the bitter memories constantly assaulting him had grown stronger. This is a really important part of the book because at this point we see that he would have a very interesting change of mental attitude. And after we go through the text, we comment. After we go through what the book brings for us, we're gonna talk in spiritist terms what this is about. Secret powers, he felt like secret powers were forcing him into profound self examination. He recalled the early dreams of his youth, where to find the peace of mind that early in his life was the object of his most innermost thoughts. The teachers of Israel proclaimed that it could be found by fully observing the law. This is really interesting because he was really examining all those principles he was professing since he was a child. He had held to its principles above all else ever since the early impulses of youth. He had hated sin. This is really nice. The book brings us he had hated sin. He had consecrated himself to the ideal of serving God with all his might. He had not hesitated to carry out everything he considered to be his duty, even the most violent and cruel actions. As we've said before, he was a very, very honest man when it comes to defending the law of Israel. Where then, this is he thinking, where then was the spiritual peace he craved so much in his daily endeavors? No matter how much energy he spent, he saw himself as a laboratory of deeply sorrowful unrest. The concepts of the law of Moses did not seem enough to satisfy his overwhelming thirst. This is amazing, this information that Emmanuel brings us in this book. Although, and this is self thinking, those followers of the crucified carpenter, however, possessed an unknown peace of mind. The alleged ignorance of the gravest problems of life did not apply in their case, for Stephen had possessed a powerful mind and had shown, upon dying, an impressive composure accompanied by spiritual values that were truly amazing. In spite of the fact that his companions were calling his attention to the first sights of Damascus outlined in the distance, Saul could not rid himself of this gloomy soliloquy. He himself could not explain what was happening with him. His memories were reaching back to the time of his early childhood. His entire industrial past appeared clearly in that introspective examination. Among all the familiar figures, the memory of Stephen and Abigail stood out the most, as if urging him to question himself even further. Why had these two siblings from Corinth acquired such preeminence amid all the problems of his inner self? Saul was thinking, reflecting. He remembered his most noteworthy friends, but in none of them did he find moral qualities like those of that young preacher of the way. He was thinking about Stephen, who had challenged his political religious authority right there in front of all Jerusalem, disdaining humiliation and death, only to die thereafter, blessing Saul's iniquitous and implacable decision. What power had brought them together in the labyrinth of the world in such a way that his heart would never forget them? The painful truth of the matter was that he had found no inner peace despite his victories and the enjoyment of all the prerogatives and privileges of the most eminent personages of his people. He lined up in his mind the young woman he had met throughout his life. Now he was thinking about Abigail, including those from his childhood, but in none of them could he find the same characteristics as in Abigail. Those women, they were not Abigail, who had divined his innermost wishes. And then I'm I reach the end of my part here. Tormented by these deep inquiries absorbing his mind, he seemed to wake up from a long nightmare. Now we're with Daniel.
Thanks, João. So Saul was not only immersed in so many deep thoughts, but also his senses started to confuse him, and he got off balance and fell on the hot sand. And then a vision took place, as if the atmosphere became torn apart and revealed a light that, um, like Emmanuel described, bathed his dazzled eyes, bringing the image of a man in Nazarene fashion, with a powerful magnetic gaze and a heavenly gentle expression coming towards him. So while Saul was contemplating that man in profound wonder, his unforgettable voice made himself heard. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? This phrase is so famous as much as his magnetic gaze. This is very characteristic of Jesus. So thoughtlessly, Saul was on his knees, overtaken by a sentiment of adoration, and then he could only take breath to ask, "Who are you, Lord?" And that man said, "I am Jesus." Imagine his soul and his whole blood becoming cold at that moment. How much, how intense that sensation was. Saul could no longer hold his posture and wept, bent to the ground. His traveling companions surrounded him, trying to understand what could be the cause of those reactions, and how many thoughts overflow in his mind, such as, the men of the way were right after all. At that uh, precise moment, he started to think all, let's say, deeper than he was until then. Stephen's words were the pure truth. Abigail believed was the path to the truth. Then that man was the Messiah, was actually the Messiah, and his resurrection was no fairy tale. So imagine how much it was. It was all in one less than 1 minute. So many feelings and so many thoughts in Saul's mind, and that he actually became the persecutor of the Messiah's disciples. So he realized and accepted without a doubt that that man, that Nazarene man, was the Messiah. Jesus noticed Saul's stifled voice due to a true repentant contrition. So he came closer and said, "Do not kick against the goads." Saul made his first profession of faith by asking, "Lord, what you what would you have me do?" With his humble question, with this humble question, Saul manifested his strong resolution in becoming a lowly servant and not choosing the endeavors that could be designed to him. So we see that this part is interesting because his strength, his energy, and even his harshness uh, turned against him, used all his energy to decide his future from that moment on. And this is peculiar of Saul. And Jesus said kindly, "Get up, Saul, go into the city, and there you will be told what to do." As the vision finished, Saul rubbed his eyes, trying to remove that veil that shrouded his eyes. And Jesus chose at that moment to close Saul's eyes to those destructive theories in order to save him. The companions were trying to understand what happened after the light brightened from the sky, which made the doctor fall off his mount and talk to the invisible. So they started to say, "He's delirious, he's feverish, or the man of the way practice witchcraft," and so on. As Saul could put himself together, wiped his eyes, and they hastened to assist him. Saul just said, I'm blind. He made a gesture over his eyes, said, I'm blind. I saw Jesus of Nazareth. And they made signs between themselves, confirming their conjectures about the witchcraft of the way. And the one named Jacob pointed out, Sir, we're sorry about your illness when we need to decide what to do with the caravan. So it's a bit short in this part, but there's so much to talk about. We're gonna do it later, but for now, I'll pass the word to Nora.
This part is even shorter. We'll definitely have a lot to talk about because basically, what ends up happening is they continue to discuss, Sal's condition. We can imagine putting ourselves in this idea. Saul is this very strong figure, right? We've seen that, and we can even infer that he grooms himself. He's very well kept, and he's the man who might, be always like put on something, and then all of a sudden they're seeing him completely different. He's blind, and what's more interesting is that now Saul's language has changed as well, which is kind of creating, especially Jacob, one of the servants. He's the one that's reacting more to this. It says that, Saul was telling him, okay, we're going to have to go to Damascus. And then, he said in a very oppressed and anguished voice, and then, until now you have been my servants, but from now on I am too a slave. I no longer belong to myself. when when Saul says that, it Emmanuel says that Jacob like started to cry because he was like, oh, something's off with Saul. He's not his usual self. And so they make a plan. So the plan is then they're going to go to Damascus where he's going to get help, medical help. And then the important key is that Saul tells the servants, hey, you guys are going to go to Jerusalem, and you're gonna share the news. And so it's very interesting as they're traveling to Damascus. I was kind of thinking there is a little change every time that we've kind of had a chapter. There's always dialogue. Saul is always talking, whether he's talking to Abby or to a servant or to someone, the court. But at the end of this chapter, this part, it's very quiet, it's very reflective. And I can imagine too that as they're traveling, perhaps you guys might want to also see what you guys feel. He was probably more introverted. He had a different kind of peace, even though it might not seem like it, but he had an experience. That light was, we can't even imagine. Like something happened. I know we're going to talk about it. And so, they keep going. And as they're going into Damascus, Emmanuel describes this very solemn uh, place. Like it's very quiet, it's solemn, but it's about to rain. And it says that as they're going in there, of course, Saul has no idea it's the servants that are like leading him because of the rain. All of like the windows of the houses, they're all being shut down, they're being closed, right, to protect the homes. And it's such a huge contrast from what Saul was used to, right? That he walks into the city, we can imagine everybody cheering for him and the feast and all these things. But now, not only could he not walk by himself, he was being guided. But it says here that people did not even recognize who he was now as this new Saul that was ill, blind, but yet very he seemed he was at peace. So it is very powerful. I'm gonna read two things, so we can start with a discussion real quickly. And that's the part where he says, Jacob, don't worry about me. This is Saul. As for what I myself must do now, I need to get to Damascus without delay. And the rest of you, just go on. It says here, it was right for his visual perception to have ceased in order to keep forever the memory of the glorious minute of his transformation to a more sublime life. So we think about it on the surface, we could say he's worse. I mean, he's blind now, he cannot see everything who he was, but yet he's actually better because he's seeing with different eyes. In the Bible, I didn't have time to put a slide, but in Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verses, I think, 11 and on, it says, He, God, Mother, Father, God, has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there's nothing better for men than to be happy and do good while they live, that everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil. This is a gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken. So it's beautiful how in this part of the Bible describes a little bit about Saul. Everything was in the time, and everything that is happening to him was neither more nor less. It was exactly what needed to happen to him. And so then we know that even though he was had a different kind of strength, right? He had to go inside of himself and he's going to have to do the work. Again, I'm reading the chapters as we're going, so I'm not sure how he is, but I know that this transformation it's a different Saul, right? And we know who he's going to be. But nevertheless, melancholy is part of us, and there has to be a part of him too, because if not, Emmanuel wouldn't put those like the rain and the darkness and all of that. Those are like little hints that for us to know that there was still some of that. So in the gospel, Francois de Geneva actually talks a little bit about melancholy. He says, Believe me and strongly resist the feelings that weaken your willpower. The yearnings for a better life are innate in the spirit of all humans, but do not seek them in this world. And nowadays, as God is sending his spirits to instruct you about the divine happiness reserved for you, patiently await the angel of deliverance, who will break the bonds that hold your spirit captive. Remember that during your trial on earth, you have a mission that you cannot doubt, whether in dedicating yourself to family or whether in fulfilling the various obligations that God has entrusted you. If during the course of this trial and while performing your task, you see worries, troubles, and vexations fall upon you, be strong and courageous in order to bear them. Face them resolutely, okay? And this is so powerful because even the spirits kind of tell us when this comes, we just keep moving forward, we just hold on, and we will get the I don't know, the gift from this experience, the breakthroughs, in other words, right? And that's exactly how Saul is. Even though we started off commenting on the surface, he's much worse. In actuality, he's much better. And this melancholy and this part of God's timing, it's all for a purpose, and all he has to do is believe it. And so far, we end part one with a very different sound. So it's beautiful because us too, right? When we are going through a difficulty, when we're going through all of this, sometimes we have to see things from a different perspective. We can go on, probably do a whole hour on what does it mean with the eyesight, because that in itself symbolizes so many things, right? We know the spirits talk about in the spirits book, like when we see with the eyes of the soul is completely different than with these eyes. And so there's so many things, dear friends, but it was absolutely beautiful. And I was like, wow. Yeah. So that was my part.
So beautiful, dear.
It
Both of
was.
you guys. did
All of us. Yeah.
beautifully tonight. I want to bring a couple of things for us to think and discuss here since this is a study. And of course, you guys can bring other things as well. The first thing for us to think, I think that we do need to analyze the fact that while he was going to Damascus, he started to have this changing when it comes to his mental attitude. Because we need to think that although Jesus Christ, the Almighty, our great master, appeared to him, the laws of God, they are what they are. And Jesus, of course, respect those laws. So we have a man that was fully immersed. He was totally immersed in materialism. He was always searching his pride. He was always searching those things. And in this terms, blindness really comes in this significant very significant terms, because he couldn't see anymore. But before we reached that point, he was already having different thoughts while he was going to Damascus. And this is really interesting, because when we go through the Spiritist doctrine, when we go through André Louis' books, we see that if he didn't could get in this higher vibration, in this higher level of thought, those good spirits, they would not be able to reach him, because they would not be in the same vibration. They wouldn't be able to have any connection. This is really interesting, because we see that he was being inspired to have different thoughts. And as he was having those different thoughts, thinking about how he was not feeling satisfied with the law of Moses, how he was needing something else, how he was admiring Stephen's peace of mind, Abigail's resignation, all of that, he was elevating his vibrational pattern. And as he gets higher and higher in terms of vibration, he could be inspired by Abigail and Stephen, that we know from everything that we have read here were good and elevated and much more purified spirits. And at the end of that journey, he could have his amazing moment with Jesus Christ himself. So the book really brings us in this part for us this amazing reflection, how we need to help ourselves in order to be helped, how we need to do our part and to go through our part of the way that we have to go through in order to get helped, to be um, surrounded by those good spirits. This is really significant, because we see here in this part of the book, and of course, we're having a study here, a very nice, practical way through which we can attract those good spirits. And we see that he's going through a huge change, and that more would happen to him. But the first thing, this first part of the way, he had to go through by himself, and he had to do this part of the work. What do you guys think about that, this vibrational difference that they had and that he was trying to
Mhm.
diminish?
Well, it's powerful because when we think of Saul, I mean, he was the one that was persecuting everyone, and yet he had that one-on-one experience with Jesus and that beautiful line. So we all have a past, and it doesn't matter what it is. The past is the past. Like you said, that moment that he was in that vibration, that's it. And as long and he maintains himself that way, yeah, and it's powerful. So I loved it because like I'm not perfect, and I know I haven't this life, might be the as well as same as might be the first life that we really are getting an opportunity to truly study and move forward. So we cannot, it's a inspiring. And I know Daniel has always said, I relate a lot to Saul. I really like him. Have always been like Abby, right? But this is the part where totally Daniel, right? Because that's beautiful. Yeah.
Bro, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I thought the same way that you did, and this this is those those feelings and thoughts he saw or was having at the trip. was really were really a preparation for what was coming. So I don't believe that happened. That preparation um, occurred only during the trip. It was before, days and days before, and through the books, mostly from André Luiz, we learned that the spirits work a lot to, in silent and anonymously, prepare us to great transformations in our lives. Of course, we are talking about not ordinary spirits here. We're talking about very mature and probably much older than us, those spirits. Um, Stephen, Saul, Abigail, and he was really prepared, just like you said. I agree 100%. And I thought about the phenomenon itself. How could this happen? Because we learn in through the books that we have this equipment, which is our body, to be prepared, especially for mediumnity. So science nowadays speculates about uh, quartz crystals over covering our pituitary gland. So if you, hypothetically, if you don't have those crystals, you can't manifest mediumnity in an evident way. Okay, so like a phenomenon. But how this can happen, even involving Jesus? And I think this is the answer. How many resources Jesus may know to make this happen in order to save not only Saul, but so many. We can think ourselves like his sons, sons and daughters of Saul's letters that he wrote after that day. So it's it's giant, it's so great, and I am, like Nora said, I'm a fan and I admire Saul, despite the all the harsh things, the horrible things he did. But I can understand how he was so devoted to that theory. He really believed that, and he was trying his best to do to accomplish the laws. But once he got that proof, without a doubt, he could not longer question. He used that same energy to act according to the gospel. It's amazing.
Amazing, bro. Amazing. Those reflections are great because when we think about those mediumistic phenomenons, of course, there was a beforehand preparation by all those great spirits that were helping him. This is very nice. This perspective is really, really important here. Another part of this amazing chapter, um, which we're going through, is the amazing phrase that he said to Jesus: Lord, what would you have me do? This phrase is really significant because, first of all, it really reminds us of our great Mary of Nazareth, Jesus' mother, because we saw her all over the Gospels saying that type of thing. And although she went through very, very harsh moments, she was always putting herself in that position. Lord, what would you have me do? This is really interesting because when we look to those characters, we see that as Daniel has started talking, there is this huge preparation. We know that Mother Mary, she needed this huge a huge enterprise so she could come. And with a spirit like Saul of Tarsus, it wouldn't be different. Although I do think that she's totally different. She has a much more purified spirit. But as we've seen before, he was a very honest man when it comes to defending what he believed. So at that point, when he saw that Jesus was real, that Jesus was the Messiah, that Jesus was calling him, he said those amazing, beautiful words. A very interesting thing for us to think here is I'm gonna tell you guys a story. A couple of weeks ago, a guy found me on Instagram in this live videos that we do, and he told me that he wasn't thinking he had just read this book, and that he wasn't thinking that it was fair that he read the entire book. So I'm not giving any spoilers, but he didn't think that it was fair for Jesus to appear the Saul of Tarsus, that Jesus does not appear to anybody, that he had this huge chance. And then we enter this reflection, and this is really important here. We are being called every single day. We are in a very, very different position. Our lives as Christians, they are much easier. We have the gospel. We have the gospel in our iPhones, in our Kindles. We have the gospel. We have Jesus calling us every single day. Why aren't we as Christians saying those exact same words? Lord, what you would have me do? Because do we believe as he was believing, or we don't believe? Why are we not putting ourselves in that position? And it's not fair, and it's not appropriate for us to think that Jesus was giving him any privilege, because he was not. As we've seen, he was being prepared much longer with the Jewish tradition, with being an honest man about all that, to become this huge apostle of Christ. And when the time came, he was ready. He was ready, and he said those words in a very just, honest, and beautiful way. A very important reflection here. Why aren't we as Christians saying those exact same words? What do you
Absolutely.
guys think?
And even when we think about it, we can take this in like different terms. If we don't want to be religious, um, we don't have to, we could take it literal, or somebody could literally see that. Or we can take it as like it doesn't have to be like it was an actual light, that it was like him. It could be like when people are in meditation, when they're in this place, right? Like you talked about that vibration, it could have been an energetic moment. So sometimes it might be more comfortable depending where we're at. And I know this is a historical book and it's spiritism, but sometimes we can understand things differently. And I personally, I could see, what the thing is, that we all can have this experience. It doesn't have to be literal, like I need to see the light in order for it to be fair, like Sal. Like if I keep working, keep working, because it's a lot of discipline. And like you said, we have to remove the materialistic components, which takes time in order for us to reach to that vibration. But Jean, like you said, today Jesus is not an actual image, it's through everything, or God, the light, the source. We are already at this understanding that it's an experience now, and we could have these experiences through so many things, and even just us interacting here, right? uh, Experience in friendship, that is already like a sound experience, because that experience, notice how Emmanuel, he doesn't necessarily focus on, oh, Jesus in the light. It was the afterwards that we're actually kind of focusing on, right? And so so when we find ourselves in that vibration and that energy, willing to do this, and then yeah, we can also have that. And I mean, we're in modern times too. We cannot, even mediumship has changed. We've talked a lot about this. It's not like before, Allan Kardec's time, the tables and everything. Today is a little bit different, and We could say that these experiences are different and they're unique to us. When Jesus came, and I'm gonna sound now I'm gonna use religious terms, but when Jesus came on the cross and he dies and he says, "The only thing I live, love your neighbor as um, yourself." That's it. All of a sudden, is we have access to this. Not just people of the law, not just people who are educated, not just certain people. We all have access to Jesus. And that's exactly, I don't know if I'm making sense, you guys, but that's the way I see it. It's interesting though, because I never thought about it that way. I was like, oh, wow, how beautiful. Like, wow, interesting.
Bro, do you want to say something?
I was looking at Norah at the frame, and I noticed uh, the phrase under Kaderk Radio logo. It's nourish your soul. So that's what we are doing right here with those reflections. And why aren't we making this question? Um, yeah, that's a fault. That's a flaw that we have, but we have to not. I think. Let me say. I don't. A few years ago, I really reduced the number of prayers that I make. So because I tried to I I tried to and I succeeded to transform every action. Let's say not every action. I'm not that wise, but when I'm doing something, I can think about how am I doing I'm playing my role in the world, and how am I being good to society, and how am I applying uh, everything I know about the gospel, about spiritism in my work, in my conversations. Um, Sometimes I do make mistakes. Of course, we all do, but I feel comfortable enough to not have to stop and make prayers all the time. And uh, I think this question becomes implicit in my thoughts and in my actions. It's like, what should I do now? You know, how would I be? Uh, I won't say the word digno in Portuguese. How would it be? I can remember now. So I should deserve through my acts all uh, the intelligence and the sacrifice that Jesus applied to bring the gospel to us. And it's a matter of embracing this uh, this concept of acting according to the gospel in everything we do. So I started to feel comfortable not making prayers and actually verbalizing something to Jesus or to God. You know, I it's something I feel that I wanted to share. I think it's part of this reflection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the actions, right? I know there's a movement here in the US too right now. Because we had some school shootings and people have said, they don't literally mean stop with the prayers. We need action, but I think it's what you're saying, Daniel. It's, yes, we pray, but it's like, well, we need change, we need actions, and it's with ourselves too, And even Saul there, he had the experience, but he like physically he did it. He wasn't just, okay, let me tell you about my experience and I'm gonna pray. And he was, there's gonna be a lot of action. So I get it. Yeah. So
There's a phrase that Chico used to say that those hands and a couple of other very important Christians in Brazil and in the world said um, phrases like, those hands that work are much more blessed than those lips that pray. This is what we are talking about here. Heading to the end, I still want us to reflect on the fact that blindness here is really significant because we have this Saul of Tarsus, the Almighty, though that man that had that amazing speech that could impress everybody, that was heading to be the most important man on earth. On Jerusalem. He was really important, and he was always looking outside himself. He was always very very preoccupied about what would other people think about him. We saw that process with him and Abigail, that he was very ashamed that Abigail was Stephen's sister. We saw through those first chapters that we gone through that he was really really preoccupied with everything that was outside him, because he was very very preoccupied with his pride, with all of that. And then we see this man without the capacity to see, absolutely blind. And after that, he starts to look and to perceive those inner thoughts, those inner emotions, these amazing inner world that we all have. And unfortunately, he had to go through blindness to achieve that point. How much do we need to go through dark times to suffer us to stop and look inwardly? This is really important for us to clarify here, that we are not as Christians saying that everybody needs to suffer in order to improve or to get a much purified spirit. This is not about that, especially because Emmanuel himself, he has this amazing book called Thought and Life, in which he tells us that we can evolve through three paths: getting bored, loving, and suffering. So we have choices. With Jesus, we know that it's all about the love way. But we see here this man that had to go through blindness in order to look to his inner self and start making better reflections and start his salvation process. What do you guys think about that?
Nora leads first.
I knew you was gonna say you go.
Do
I have to say I second that, and actually he it was, I'm gonna go based on the text here because I know sometimes I go on. It, when he was walking, he had to be guided, it says here, with faltering steps, his feet hurting at each uncertain movement, he would walk in any manner possible in order to carry out the divine orders, right? It was indispensable not to mind the difficulties. It was vital not to forget the purpose. And I think it's part of what, it's not that it's, oh, I'm just gonna suffer, but we have a purpose and we just gotta do it. I always see it more. It has changed because before I would say, oh, suffering. But then when I became a teacher, I realized if we were to use that analogy in the context of us as the universe, we're in the school of life here, right? We have to have exams because as a teacher, we go over a unit, we need assessments. And so when the assessment comes, is going to show whether the student understood the material or not. Are there places that the student needs to understand or not? And so it's always the same thing. When we pass out the exams, oh, you have like, guys, no, change it up because now you're going to put that energy into your exam. There's a purpose. Your purpose here is for you to show off or however, dependence. Show what you got. Try your best. And let's see what happens and move forward. I said, look at the difference between you sitting here and being like, you know what? I'm going to put whatever. I can't do it. I can't, right? Change those thoughts. And I really do think that these eyes now, since we're talking about the side, right? These are the eyes that we want to have. That it's not, we need to forget, I mean, not forget our purpose, it says here, but to, even though our feet are hurting, even though it might be difficult, carry out those divine orders. Just trust the purpose trusted. Just like students need, you always say, trust the teacher, should, right? Trust it. That's the same way. Jesus is the ultimate teacher. He's the one. And if we just trust, eventually when, I mean, we could sit here, I'm sure João and Daniel have so many stories. I just had something happen. It's too long, but the idea is I could not believe that I was being protected. Yet I thought, oh, because we're human. And I was like, oh no, there was a purpose. It was just having faith and praying. And I, all of us, we are saved, just like Saul too had his mentors. We all have our mentors. We all have the things that come with us, but we just need to trust and not focus on the suffering, but just see it. It's a test. Move forward. Okay, next. It has helped me a lot. I don't know about you all, but it has helped a lot when I see it that way. Because we all have problems. It's not easy. We all have issues. Yeah, absolutely.
Bro, your turn.
Um, we have this this phenomenon of getting soul blind has a moral purpose, as Nora said, and it's very well established. And I'm especially interested in the phenomenon. How could this be done? Um, of course, I don't know, but I like to seek some clues to understand a bit more. So, uh, science has shown us, um, like a live wire we have inside our bodies. They look like blue strings, microscopic blue strings that cover all our body, and it matches pretty much like the acupoints, the acupuncture. And this proves how it explains actually how the electricity runs our body. And if there is electricity, there is magnetic field, and this magnetic field can be influenced and make and change um, our bodily functions, like making us heal, as acupuncture can make, and many other science and anesthesia, and also a spiritual influence over it. So Jesus, I'm pretty positive that Jesus could manage to block the energy flow of Saul's eyes, and this is how he could stop and then uh, give back. This is a small spoiler, but when he gets back his vision, it's just unblocking his magnetic bodily field, if I may say this. But I'm so interested about this. I hope our science get to prove to study this those functions we have. So amazing, it's overwhelming.
Amazing, bro. Amazing. We are reaching our time here, but before I just want to say one more thing. I think that we really should keep two great examples that the Bible, especially the Gospel, the New Testament, brings us: Mary Magdalene and Paul, Saul of Tarsus, because they went through this really rough patch. They were really immersed in materialism. We've seen both of them through those amazing stories that were psychographed by Chico Xavier, and yet they both had those amazing experiences with Christ. She was the first one to see the resurrected Christ, and he was presented, he had received that amazing gift of seeing Christ in that way to Damascus. So through those two great examples, we can have this huge hope that there is much ways for us to evolve, because we are talking about two characters, about two spirits that in one incarnation they went through all that through this huge transformation. So we don't, because a couple of times as spiritists we think that we need to go through 1,000 incarnations in order to get purified. And here we have this amazing example, because I'm not going to give an spoiler, but talking about Mary Magdalene, she was received when she was discarnating by Christ himself in the spirituality. So we are able to do great deeds, to evolve a lot, to purify ourselves. The way is not that easy, and the door is quite narrow, but it is possible. So I do want us to keep in our hearts that it is possible. Evolving is a truthful possibility that we have here while incarnated beings on earth. Do you guys want to say something before we finish?
I didn't even open. Maybe when we start talking about the healings, we can bring in the signs. But, this book, I think I had mentioned it. It's beautiful because the first part has a lot of those values, I think, and, still very, very Christian. I just feel like that. And I feel like now we're starting to get right around more of the spiritist stuff or the mediumistic stuff, the stuff that Daniel is bringing. So it's just so the way Emmanuel takes us through this, like a true teacher, very subtle and softly, just like the changes that Saul has had, is just phenomenal. And I'm really loving this, and it's a beautiful book, friends. If you have not read it, it would be great. Just right now it's summer, so it'd be a great summer read. And if you're in Brazil during the winter, come on, a book with a coffee is like priceless. And Emmanuel there, because I feel like when we read, we're like connecting to them. It's beautiful. So thank you, friends.
Bro, do you want to say something?
Oh no, just thank you guys. It's been amazing. Let's go. Let's go through all this book.
Yes,
It's
let's
it's
go.
been amazing.
Yes,
So much.
yes, the best speech. Let's go. Let's keep on going, guys. I want to thank
Yeah.
you both as well, my great friends here, with which I learned so much. I have been learning a lot with you too. I want to thank everybody that is still here with us, everybody that is accompanying the studies. I have received much great messages. I'm really happy, and having you guys with us, this makes the journey much more colorful, pretty, and happier, much happier. So we have finished tonight the first part of the book. I'm really happy that we've gotten to here. Really grateful. So the tone of tonight is gratitude. Thank you guys so much. I see you guys next week. Okay, thank you. Bye
Bye.
See
bye.
you guys. Bye bye.
Bye.